Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Miss Mutmaina NPD as a lecturer of Educational Research course and my beloved friend. Okay, we are from Group 3. Let me introduce our member. They are me, Miftah Jana, Melanium, and also Merlinda. Okay, for the first material will be explained by me. The nature of correlation research. Correlation research is sometimes called associational research. In associational research, the relationships among two or more variables are studied without any attempt to influence them. In their simplest form, correlational studies investigate the possibility of relationship between only two variables, although investigation of more than two variables are common. In contrast to experimental research, however, there is no manipulation of variables in correlational research. Correlational research is also sometimes referred to as a form of descriptive research because it describes an existing relationship between variables. Next is purposes of correlation. Correlational research is carried out for one of two basic purposes, either to help explain important human behaviors or to predict likely outcomes. And next, explanatory studies. A major purpose of correlational research is to clarify our understanding of important phenomena by identifying relationships among variables, particularly in developmental psychology, where experimental studies are especially difficult to design. Much has been learned by analyzing relationships among several variables. For example, correlations found between variables such as complexity of parent speech and rate of language acquisition have taught researchers much about how language is acquired. Similarly, the discovery that among variables related to reading skill, auditory memory shows a substantial correlation with reading ability has expanded our understanding of the complex phenomenon of reading. Next is prediction studies. A second purpose of correlational research is prediction. If a relationship of sufficient magnitude exists between two variables, it becomes possible to predict a score on one variable if a score on the other variable is known. Researchers have found, for example, that high school grades are highly related to college grades. Hence, high school grade can be used to predict college grades. We would predict that a person with a high GPA in high school would be likely to have a high GPA in college. The variable that is used to make the prediction is called the predictor variable. The variable about which the prediction is made is called the criterion variable. Hence, in the above example, high school grade would be the predictor variable and college grade would be the criterion variable. Prediction studies are also used to determine the predictive validity of measuring instruments. There is factor analysis. Factor analysis is a technique that allows a researcher to determine if many variables can be described by a few factors. The mathematical calculations involved are beyond the scope of this book, but the technique essentially involves a research for cluster of variables, all of which are correlated with each other. Next, path analysis. Path analysis is used to test the likelihood of a causal connection among three or more variables. Structural modeling. Structural modeling is a sophisticated method for exploring and possibly confirming causation among several variables. Next is basic steps in correlational research. 1. Problem section. In general, three major types of problems are the focus of correlational studies. For the first is variable x relate to variable y. Second, how well does variable p predict variable c? 3. What are the relationships among a large number of variables and what prediction can be made that are based on them? Second is sample. The sample for a correlational study, as in any type of study, should be selected carefully and if possible randomly. Third, instruments. The instruments used to measure the two or more variables involved in a correlational study may take any one of a number of forms. Fourth, design and procedures. The basic design used in a correlational study is quite straightforward, using the symbol introduced in our discussion of experimental design. Fifth, data collection. In an explanatory study, all the data on both variables will usually be collected within a fairly short time. Often the instruments used are administered in a single session or in two sessions, one immediately after the other. And the last is data analysis. Okay, I think enough for me. The next explanation will be presented by Merlinda. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Merlinda. I'm from Group 3. Now I will continue the presentation. Okay, I will explain about basic steps in correlation research. In correlation research, there are 6 steps. The first is problem questions, sample, instruments, design and procedure, data collection, and last is the data analysis and interpretation. Okay, the first step is problems question. In general, there are 3 major types of problems are the focus of correlational studies. The first is variable x related to variable y? And then how well does variable p predict variable c? And the last is what are the relationships among a large number of variables and what predictions can be made that are based on them? Almost all correlational studies will revolve around one of these types of questions. Okay, the second step is sample. The sample for a correlational study, as in any type of study, should be selected carefully and, if possible, randomly. The first step in selecting a sample, of course, is to identify an appropriate population, one that is meaningful and from which the data on each of the variables of interest can be collected. The minimum acceptable sample size for a correlational study is considered by most research to be no less than 30. And then the steps number 3 is instruments. The instruments used to measure the 2 or more variables involved in a correlational study may take any one of a number of forms, but they must yield quantitative data. Although data sometimes can be collected from records of one sort or another. Most correlational studies involve the administration of some type of instrument, for example, test, questionnaire, and so on, and sometimes observation. Okay, for the next steps is design and procedures. The basic design is used in a correlational study is quite straightforward. You can see the design for a correlational study in slide. Okay, as you can see in the design, 2 or more scores are obtained from each individual in the sample, 1 score for each variable of interest. The pairs of scores are then correlated, and the resulting correlation coefficient indicates the degree of relationship between the variables. Okay, the next step is data collection. In an explanatory study, all the data on both variables will usually be collected within a fairly short time. Often, the instruments used are administered in a single session or in two sessions, one immediately after the other. Thus, if a researcher were interested in measuring the relationship between verbal aptitude and memory, a test of verbal aptitude and another of memory would be administered closely together to the same group of subjects. Okay, the next step is data analysis and interpretation. When variables are correlated, a correlation coefficient is produced. The stronger, if the sign is positive, the relationship is positive, indicating the high scores on one variable with high scores on the other variable. If the sign is negative, the relationship is negative, indicating that high scores and one variable tend to go with low scores on the other variable. Okay, for the last, I will explain about what do correlation coefficients tell us. The meaning of a given correlation coefficient, how it is applied. Correlation coefficients below 35 show only a slight relationship between variables. Such relationships have almost no value in any predictive sense. It may, of course, be important to know that certain variables are not related. And then, correlations between 40 and 60 are often found in educational research and may have theoretical or practical value, depending on the context. A correlation of at least 50 must be obtained before any crude predictions can be made about individuals. Even then, such predictions will be subject to sizable errors. Only a correlation of 65 or higher will allow individual predictions that are reasonably accurate for most purposes. Correlations over 85 indicate a close relationship between the variables correlated and are useful in predicting in individual performance. But correlations this high are rarely obtained in educational research, except when checking on reliability. And then correlation coefficients are also used to check the reliability and validity of scores obtained from tests and other instruments used in research. When so used, they are called reliability and validity coefficients. Okay, I think that's all the explanation from me. Then.
Okay, here I'm Millennium. I'm the last presenter. Okay, let's continue our material. Okay, my topic here, the first one is about the threat to internal validity. Okay, as you can see in the slide, that threat to internal validity, there are some threats identified in conducting correlational research. Okay, the first one, we have the subject characteristic. Okay, subject characteristic is individual or group have two or more characteristic might be a cause of variation in the other two variable. Yeah. Okay, so we go to the next slide. Here we have the location. Location here is mean that the different location is different for different subject. What does it mean? It means that one location may be more comfortable compared to other. And then the third one, we have the instrumentation. The instrumentation, it's mean that divided into two. We have the instrument DC and data collector characteristic. Okay, for the instrument DC, okay, care must be taken to ensure the observer don't become tired, bored, or inattentive. Yeah, inattentive. And the second one, it is the data collector characteristic. It's different gender, age, or ethnicity may affect specific response. And then the fourth one, we have the testing. So what is testing? Testing is experience of responding to the first instrument may influence subject response to the second instrument. And the fifth one, we have the mortality. What is the mortality? So mortality is loss of subject may take a relationship more or less likely in the remaining data. The data. Okay, and then we have evaluating traits to internal validity. Okay, so follow as a procedure similar to the experimental research. So it's similar to experimental research. Yeah, so the first one, we have the subject characteristic. Okay, we have four of many possible characteristic. The first one is severity of disability, and then the second one is the socio-economic level of parents, and the third one, we have cycle strength and coordination. The fourth one, we have the cycle appearance. Yeah. Okay, for the severity disability, okay, it's related to the job success can be expected to the related to severity or disability. And then the socioeconomic level of parent, its parent socioeconomic level is likely to be related to social skill. And then we have the cycle strength and coordination. Okay, this characteristic may be related to job success, and strength and coordination are not likely to be related to social skill, while it is desirable to obtain such information. And the fourth one, we have the cycle appearance. Cycle appearance, okay, it's likely to be related to the social skill. It is also likely to be related to related job success. Therefore, this variable should be assessed and controlled again by using a partial correlation. Okay, we go to our next slide. The second one is mortality. Okay, lost subject can be expected to reduce magnitude of correlation. The third one, we have location. Okay, the location here, threat could be controlled by independent assessing the job site environment. And then the fourth one is we have the instrumentation. The instrument DC observations scheduled. Okay, so it must be scheduled. Okay, so it must be more disciplined. We have to know what will we do by schedule it. And then data collector characteristic, it is the interaction of data collector and supervisor is unnecessary part. Data collector via observe should have no knowledge of job ratings. Okay, I think that's all of my explanation. Okay, thank you very much for your good attention in joining our presentation. We are so sorry if we made so many mistakes. The last we say, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.